So welcome to lecture number 22 on the Kuzari. We are in the second essay, or Ma'amar Sheni, and we are about to read paragraph 51. In this version, which most of you have, the Korobkin version, it is page 215. And as usual, I will be reading from the Michael Schwartz Hebrew translation, but you try to follow along whatever version you have. Last week, at the main theme that we discussed and sort of finished in paragraph 50 was the idea that the way to achieve that special holiness and relationship with God, the only way to do that is through the Torah, through the instruction book that God gave us, telling us the mitzvot and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. We spoke about that at length last week, and at the end, he ended with a quote from Yeshayahu, from Isaiah, which said, "Yisrael asher b'cho espoer," which it means Israel, the people of Israel, through you I achieve glory. I being, I would say capital I, but I guess I is usually capitalized. But God, right, gets glory. So that is a striking statement, and the Chazar King is about to jump on that statement. Amar Kuzari, says the Kuzari. I'm in paragraph 51 right now. Hadibor avar kan es hagvul ma'od. That seems to be jumping over a very serious line here. V'hamalitza hitira liatzma chofesh rav, and the prose, the way of speaking, the speech here is really being quite permissive with the language. Shahabori yispoer bebasar v'dam. God gets glory through human beings. How exactly does that work? Right? This is kind of a striking statement. How does God's glory get greater through human beings? I mean, it seems almost blasphemous to say such a thing. So how could Isaiah say such a thing? So the Chaver, in paragraph 52, answers it in a typical Jewish way, answers the question with a question, right? Would this be more easier if we talked about God's creation of the sun? In other words, that God's glory is great and is through observing the greatness of the sun, of his creation. In other words, the point he's trying to make is that we understand the glory of God through looking at his creations, right? Such as the sun. And he's going to elaborate more in a minute, but how much more so would God's glory become great through people like the Jewish people who are keeping the Torah? But we're about to get to that. So Amar Kuzari, so the Khazar King says, and I'm in paragraph 53 now. Yeah, sure. I wouldn't have a problem with that if you told me that God's greatness becomes evident through the sun, because Biglal Hashpa also Hagadola, the tremendous influence, the tremendous I think there should be a better word than influence. I wonder what he uses here. It's the tremendous influence that the sun has on the creation, on the entire world. Right? After after God, in other words, this is the most important thing that sustains the world, right? Obviously, God sustains the world, the creation, but the second to God almost is the sun. Shebe emtza'usa, it's through the means of the sun, uviglalan, because of the sun, mistadrim halayla v'hayom v'onos hashana. That's how we have day and night and all of the seasons of the year. Umisavim hamachtzabim hatzmachim uvalechayim. All the creatures of the world, all the plants and all the living creatures, they rely on the sun, right? Even though they didn't necessarily understand then the same way we do today about how the sun's energy is captured by plants, etc. But they certainly understood that the sun made plants grow and makes everything everything work. Bi'ora hamavik kayamim hara'iyah. We were only able to see through the light of the sun. V'hatzva'im manirim, and that we can see colors. We can, we wouldn't. The whole world would be dark. Right? Without the sun, there wouldn't be life. There wouldn't be anything. Ketzad efo lotia briaso pe'er liboros. So certainly, the creation of the sun is a glory to the creator of the sun, be'enei ha'anashim, in the eyes of human beings. So when human beings see this, the sun, as this incredible creation, which is really the source of life and the source of everything we see around us, clearly, greatness of God who created the sun is exalted. So paragraph 54, Amar Chaver. So the Chaver says, so ha'ein or iyas halev adin yoser. Would it not be true to say that the light of what the heart sees, of our I was about to say our intellect, but in the special light that shines forth, and I don't mean light like as in the usual sense, but the special light of what the heart sees and knows and feels and understands, isn't that even greater? Isn't that even more special than etzal and more specific, more exalted? Yoser me'or ha'inayim, more than the light of the eyes, right? Our understanding, our hearts, our minds, our emotions, our everything that goes on in our intellectual life is even greater than what we see with our eyes. And the sun is just something we see with our eyes. We see it, we experience it, sure, but our intellect is so much more exalted than that. Ha'im lifnei b'nei Yisrael, prior to the arrival of the people of Israel in the history of the world, Toshavei Kadur Haaretz, the people that resided on the planet Earth, right, or on the ball, which is the Earth, right? I mean, remember, this is one thing that I mentioned this in Moreh Nevuchim a couple times, but everybody knew for thousands of years that the world was round. Anyone that thinks that people, it's just it's a silly idea that people once thought. It was always known that the world was round, so that's just a given. So it's called the Kadur Haaretz, right? Lo hayam. So all the people that lived on earth before the arrival of the people of Israel, lo hayu muke ivaron ukvira, right? Prat layichidim shehez karnum. Isn't it true that weren't they blind and full of all kinds of incorrect ideas? Right, except for the few people that we knew, because remember, he mentioned the history of the world. There were always a few people that knew the oneness of God and passed that knowledge through generations. But the vast majority of people in the world, prior to the advent of the people of Israel in this world, had all kinds of crazy ideas. There were people that said there is no creator. Nivra milios bore. There isn't any part of the world that's more worthy of being a creation versus being the creator. In other words, anything is on the level of a creator or a creation. It's all one big jumble. There's no greatness of one being over another. And therefore they thought that everything is as it always has been. So there was a group of people like that. There were other people that it's the sphere or earth that was that was the creator, and they worshipped the earth. Other people felt that it's that it's fire, which is the what makes up light, and it's what gives strength and power and energy. And that's what we should worship, right? And they would worship fire. There were other people that worshipped other things and served them. As Hashemesh, some worshipped the sun. As Yirach, some worshipped the moon. As Sakochovim, some worshipped various stars. And some people worshipped various animals. Mitoch shenitlu batzuros shebegagal hamazolos, because they felt that the shapes of these animals were visible and on in different, up in the constellations. They saw the shapes of different animals. Said, "Oh, that animal must be the God." Right? Other people would worship their king. We know in many ancient civilizations, the king was the god, right? The pharaoh or whatever in various civilizations, or as Chachamim, or their wise men, they were the gods. All of them agreed that that there was nothing in this world, right, changes from nature. The world goes on the way it goes, and they worshipped all these various forms and so on. Afilu of hamispalsim, even the philosophers eventually, she'iyunam adin, that they were smart, and their analysis was very careful and very specific. Shedatam tzlula, they had clear a way of thinking. V'asher horu v'siba rishona, and they finally figured out that there is some prime mover, a prime cause. He's of course referring to Aristotle and the idea that there's the prime mover with capital P and capital M, right? That she'eno domo l'dvar macherim, and they philosophized and understood that this prime mover, this that the philosophers, the Aristotelians, understood must be the being that makes everything go, that gives everything the energy that it needs to go around and around, etc. Right? It's something that's completely different from anything else in this world. It's outside of anything that we can know and see and feel and describe. There's nothing like it. Kavu, but they understood, al pi hagyonim, according to their understanding, that it doesn't make sense, because this prime mover is so far removed from anything physical that we can understand. It's impossible that it has any actual relationship with this world. It doesn't actually change things. It doesn't do things. He doesn't make things happen. He doesn't control things, right? And certainly they understood that he wasn't involved in specific details. Like, he didn't really care or do anything about what you and I do today or tomorrow or the next day. He didn't control anything in our lives, and certainly wouldn't do anything that would be like miraculous or out of the ordinary, out of the usual humdrum of nature, as things go on. So that would be the Aristotelians. So there was all these ideas and thoughts before the Jewish people came with this novel, unusual, strange idea, which changed the world. That these were the various belief systems and various ways of worship and the things that were worshipped prior, until this special congregation arrived at Sibra Shahayaroi, the special congregation that was worthy, Sha'ar Yisraelim, that this special light should rest upon them, Shayasulon Nisim, and that God would perform special miracles, right? V'haforas minago shalom, and change the way the world worked. Obviously he's referring to the exodus of Egypt, right? His Galilee and it became clear to everyone. Sheyesh it became clear to everyone, Sheyesh la'olam bal bayis shomer, there is a boss. There is someone watching over it all. V'shalit hayudea katon v'gadol, and there's a ruler who knows the things that are happening. He knows the big things and the important things and the little things, right? V'hagomel ala tov v'yara, and he pays people back for good with reward, of course, and for evil with punishment. Tzibur zeh hafach liyos hanchayol alavavos. This completely changed and completely brought special relief to people's hearts around the world. The idea that there's a creator, but not the Aristotelian creator that has no relationship to this world, doesn't do anything. But there's a God who actually relates to us, that rewards us, that punishes us, that cares about what we do, that runs and controls things. This was an idea that arose with the Jewish people, right? And the Torah, right? Kol misha ba'acharav, anyone that came after, eno yachol lachrog me'ekronosav shel tzibur zeh, right? No one else could ignore and separate themselves from the special ideas, that this congregation introduced to the world. Ad shayom, until nowadays, we see nia ha'olam ha'miyushav. If we look around at the civilized world, right, in the world that, of course, the Kuzari or Bida Levi would have seen, everyone understands that God preceded this world. The world wasn't always here as it was. There is a creator of the world was created. The proof for this is the Jewish people. Everyone looks at the story of the people of Israel and understands that there is a God in this world. God cares what we do. He wants us to accomplish and achieve the things that he wants us to do. He wants us to stay away from the things that he doesn't want us to do. And he rewards and punishes accordingly. The things that are regarding the things that happened to the people, the Jewish people, and the things that unfortunately they suffered from. So what he's saying here is that until the Jewish people came onto the scene, right, the understanding of God, the greatness of God, was not known in the world. All of a sudden, the entire history of the world changed. The entire way the world people think about God and his relationship with this world changed. So yes, Yisrael asher b'cha espoer. It's through the people of Israel that God's glory is understood. So this is a foundation of Rabbi Levi's thought, right? And if we look into history and the history of ideas, there's no question that he's onto something here. The introduction of the idea of monotheism and a God, which is often called nowadays a personal God, a God that has a relationship with us, a God that cares about me, a God that cares about my life and cares about what I do, both as an individual and as a group and as a nation and as all of humanity. Such a God is an idea that was introduced when the Torah was introduced. And yes, it's even more important than the sun, right? Because it's shown a different kind of light into this world. So Amar Kuzari, says the Kuzari, and wait, before I read 55, I just want to ask if there's any observations or comments on what I just read. If there isn't, I'll keep on going, because these are very important ideas, and it really helps us understand what how Rabbi Levi understands religion in general and the relationship between God and us in general. This is obviously very different from the Rambam's understanding, which we learned together in our previous series on the Mor Nevuchim. But it's an approach that we're studying now, and has a tremendous amount of influence. So paragraph 55, which is on page in the Korobkin, that would be page 218, I think. Yeah, 218 at the bottom. So Amar Kuzari, says the Chazar King, the Kuzari, Ze Pe'er Gadol. Yes, you're right. This is a great glory, Havharam Mafliya, and it is something that is shining brightly in an incredibly wonderful way. Betzedek Nemar, and it's true. It is just. It is right that it says Lasos Lo Shem Olam, that when God chose the Jewish people, He made for Himself a name that lasts forever. And the way that Kuzari understands this is God gave for himself a name in this world, a Shem Olam, a name that lasts forever, because now God's reputation is great, and it lasts forever because the entire world accepted this new outlook. Vataslo Shem Kayom Azeh, we see this in Nehemiah, Ulasilo L'Shem L'Severis, we see this in Dvarim, and so on, the same idea. Okay. Nunva 56. I mean, the whole I can't let this go without making another comment. The whole idea of God as a personal God, this relationship that we have with God on a personal level is, of course, it's a foundational idea, and it's an idea that does permeate all of the uh, monotheistic religions, especially the three ones that are related to each other. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And this idea is a basic idea, and I would probably argue that most people that practice those religions that I mentioned have some level of understanding that this is how life works, that this is how our relationship with God works. Rambam had a very different understanding. He looked at it in a much more naturalistic way. But I can't overemphasize how important it is to understand that these ideas really they were described in detail here in the book that we're reading together now, and have become a foundation for major streams of Jewish thought. So let's see Nun Vav, chapter paragraph 56. So Amar HaChaver. So the Chaver says, this is after the Kuzari agreed that, yes, now I understand, yes, glory can come to God through his people. So he's going to pound the idea a little bit further. He's going to drive a little bit deeper into this idea. Don't you see Ketzad Solal David es haderach l'shevach haTorah? How King David, how he cleared the path for the praise of the Torah. Bikach she'ekdim es te'ur hashemesh, because we see in Tehillim, this is in Psalms chapter 19, where he talks about Hashemayim misaprim kvod el, the heavens speak the great honor of God, which is really the idea, like we said before, that the sun, the moon, the stars tell us how wonderful God is, because those celestial beings are incredibly powerful and wonderful and amazing, and they have so much influence on every single thing. Without those, life on earth wouldn't exist, right? So the heavens do speak. They do. The glory of God is evident through the heavens, right? Te'eres oro hahove bakol. He then goes ahead and describes the great light of the sun, and the great influence that the sun has, as zoch garmo, the purity of its light, Yashrus Maslulo, and how straight the path of the sun through the heavens is, Vifi Marav, and how beautiful it is. V'himshich, and then what did he continue? He continued that discussion ba'amro, and he said, Torah Hashem Tamima, the Torah of God is Tamima, is perfect, right? So after describing the wondrous heavens, he immediately went into saying, however, the Torah is Tamima, is perfect. Right, that's the next level. That's even higher. That's even more. And he continues. Right, so don't be in wonder that at all of these descriptions that I'm giving you of the sun, the moon, and the stars, because the Torah is even more special. Gives even more light. It's even more important. It's even more meforsa, more famous, and more better. And it doesn't sound very sophisticated, but okay. V'lulei b'nei Yisrael lo haisa Torah, and if not for the people of Israel, the Torah never would be here, right? There would be no Torah. Heim lo ha'adfu b'glal Moshe. The people of Israel are not great because they had a great leader named Moshe. He's taking a swipe here at religions that are personality cults.
Oh, we need you.
Based on greatness that happens because of a person. We're not great because we had Moshe was a great leader, but rather Ela Moshe had daf big lalam. It's the reason why Moshe was so great was because of the Jewish people that he led. The special love that God had was love that he had for the congregation, for the group, for the people of Israel. Zera, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, because we were descendants of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moshe was chosen to bring these people, to introduce them to this good thing, this Torah. We're not called the nation of Moses, right? Ela umas Elohim, we are called the nation of God. Kakasuv Am Hashem, V'Am Elokei Avram, etc. That's the nation of the God of Abraham, not the nation of Abraham. So we're not great because we had a great leader once. No, we're not great because of Abraham, because of Isaac, because of Jacob, because of Moshe, because of, I don't know, any one of the great leaders that have arisen among our people. We're great because of our special relationship with God. Dak dikonus babituyim, and this is very interesting. Being careful with saying the right words. Haramas hagabos, and raising up your eyebrows, raising up your eyes and looking at the heavens. Hastoras ishon, right? And the it's uh, crying a lot, and and harbos tachanunim v'hatorah, and crying and supplicating, and all of the gesturing that people do when they're acting religiously inspired by putting their heads up to heaven and crying and everything, all that stuff. That's not what does the trick, right? That doesn't prove that a person is spiritual. I'll never forget something that happened with my father once when I was probably around 17 or 18. And we were in a Hasidic synagogue, and everyone was singing, and the spiritual energy was palpably incredibly uplifting, and I was flying high, and people were screaming really loud and getting really into it and everything. And then my father says to me in the middle of the whole thing, he says, "Do you think that because you scream louder, God somehow hears you better?" And all of a sudden, it was like popping a balloon, you know? It was like all of a sudden you realize, all of this stuff, it might feel good. It might, but this is not it, you know? God doesn't, if there's a guy sitting in the corner who is tamim, who is perfect in his heart and his soul, and he's not screaming and he's not dancing, he may just have a much more close relationship with God than all the people that are jumping and making all of these gestures and screaming at the top of their lungs. I'm not saying there's no place for singing and all those kinds of gestures. That's not what he's saying here either. But this doesn't prove that you're spiritual. Anybody can do that stuff. Anybody can lift up their eyes and lift up their hands. That doesn't do it. How do you know that someone has something spiritually special? Hein kavanos tehoros is pure intent. Have a pure heart, right? Shemorim alein masim, and how do you know? Because such a person that has a pure intent, how do you know that he has pure intent? Because you look at the actions that he does. So asuim lachbid al adam, right? The kinds of actions that you do that are usually onerous for people to do, usually difficult and challenging. So this is key, and I said this way back in the beginning in some of our first lectures. The bottom line of Judaism is action, right? It's not guy can look like the holiest guy in the world. He can be and everything. He can have the longest beard, and he can be singing, and he can look so holy, and his face is shining. It means nothing if it's not matched up with action, right? How do you know if he's for real? Does he live the Torah lifestyle? Does he do what the Torah commands us to do? Does he stay away from the things that the Torah commands us to stay away from? Well, then he's pure. Then okay, that guy has something spiritual to offer. The other guy who doesn't, he talks the talk but doesn't walk the walk, forget about it, right? He doesn't have anything special to offer. Ela shehu osa osam b'meirav hayishtadlos v'ahava. Not only there are things that we are commanded to do that are usually they're not easy. It's not easy to get up in the morning and daven. It's not easy to even come to a class to learn. It's not easy to give tzedakah, to give charity from your own hard-earned money. It's not easy to go out of your way to help somebody. It's not easy to give a percentage of your goods to the poor. It's not easy to have to keep Shabbos and do things that when you'd rather be doing other stuff. But when you do those things that the Torah commands you to do, and you do it with joy and love, that's how you see where a person's heart really is, right? Right? He turns wherever he is, he's focused on the special place. Ola L'Regel, he goes to the regel. He goes to the Beis Hamikdash Shalosh פעם בשנה, 3 times a year. Can you imagine how hard it was back then when they weren't able to get on a flight and fly every Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot to the Holy Land? Now you can go, or if you live in Israel, you can get on a train or a bus. You're there in 2 hours. It costs a few shekels, and you're done. You're there, finished, easy, nothing, no big deal. And when you get there, you can have a falafel and a nice hotel room, and everything's good. But back then, it meant weeks of travel and leaving your farm behind, leaving your possessions behind, and going to celebrate in that place. So when you go and you do that, when everyone's mind is back there worrying about everything going on at home, but you're able to come and do it. No matter how much it costs him to do it, and no matter how difficult the trip is, and when he does this and he listens and he goes with happiness and joyousness and he celebrates in the Beis Hamikdash, he celebrates with God those festivals. That shows something about a person. Motzi Maser Rishon, and he takes a tithe. He gives a portion of it, a tenth of his profit. He gives away to the Levi, Maser Sheni or Maser Ani, and he takes the tithe out for Maser Sheni to bring with him to Jerusalem to celebrate with. Maser Ani, he takes a tenth out to give to the poor. Makriv Vesare Ayon, right? And he doesn't plow his field during Shemitah, and he doesn't plow his field during Yovel. During the 7th year, he leaves his entire field fallow because God told him to do so. Motzi Otzos, and he spends so much money on Shabbos and on Chagim and on the holidays. And he rests on those days and he spends them the way he's supposed to. Maybe Bikurim, he brings the Bikurim, the first fruits, Vesabachoros, and the first animals, and Matnos Kuna, and all of the gifts to the Kohanim, Bereshis Hagez, and the beginning of the first shearings of his sheep, Bereshis Arisosechem, and the beginning of his dough, and every time he bakes bread, he gives a piece of it to the Kohen. Nosef Lanadarim Aladavas, all that in addition to the special things that he donates on his own, of his own generosity. V'nosef l'mashem mutal al kol zadon v'chol shgaga, right? And in addition to the things that he's obligated to bring because of sins he may have committed, that he might have to bring special sacrifices. V'yashlamim, and he brings karbanos in order to participate in meals with other people and so on. He might have other sacrifices he needs to bring because of things that may have happened. He may have not been because of impurities or koleda or every birth, to bring special karbanos shetiyah v'alkol zivos v'chol tzarat v'rab and so on and so forth. Whatever happens, the expense is staggering, and to do this 3 times a year, and to do it with joy, and that says something about a person. A guy standing there and acting spiritual, what does that mean if he doesn't act, he doesn't do, right? And not only, and when he does do, he does it dragging his leg. When you come in, you need help for a cause, and you have to drive him nuts for him to give you three times. And I'm not talking about someone who can't afford it, but someone who can afford it. And but just to drag him out to do somebody a favor is like whatever. But meanwhile in shul he screams the loudest. That means nothing, right? Kol zos b'mitzvahs Elohim yisala. Are you guys able to hear me? Because my AC just went on. It's pretty loud. But is the thumbs up if it's okay? All right, fine, okay. So kol zos b'mitzvahs Elohim yisala v'lo mitoch yomer l'istamech ala seichel. All of this he does, why? Right? And this is very Halevian, not Maimonidean, what he's about to say. He does it because God told him to do so, not because his mind tells him that it's the right thing to do. He does it because he's devoted to God. V'lo mitoch es chakmos, not because he decided that this is the smart thing to do. Right? Ki ein bicholas basar v'adam. It's impossible for a human being likvoa shiuram shel dvarim eila, to understand how to balance these things, right? When human beings sit down and decide, they could say, you know what? Yeah, it's important to go to the regal and bring all of these things to the Beis Hamikdash, all these karbanos, but it's also important for me to stay home, because when I stay home, I meet with my friends, and friendship is important. I do lots of things at home that are important. How do I? But you know what? It makes more sense for me to stay home this year, right? Meanwhile, he's, what is his real motivations? I don't know. but he thinks that this is the right thing to do. But meanwhile, he's giving up and he's not doing what God told him to do, right? So it's human beings. Once we start using our own minds, we get ourselves into trouble. Follow God's instructions, you'll be fine, and do it because God said so. Now, this is classic Halevian theology, so you gotta understand it and absorb it. Okay, so so we can't right, but open masudar proportion. We don't know the proportions. Yeah, it's true. Staying home is sometimes a good thing, and it's not always necessarily the best thing to go to the base of Mikdash. But God told you to go 3 times a year. So if it's Pesach, go. And when you get home later, you'll hang with your friends. That's fine. But don't give up on what God told you to do because you decided that today this is more important than what God told you to do. Um, Bili chashash sheikon shibush al yad. Right. He hiksa kaviyachol Yisrael v'kavas yirlem. God kind of, sort of made us our guidebook, and He told us at what point are we supposed to do what, right? V'kavas yir yivul eretz Yisrael. He told us, how much of what we get from the land of Israel, how much we're supposed to keep for ourselves, and how much we give away. Tzemachim and balechayim, and the different plants and animals of Kava Ashir L'Shevet Levi. He decided how much is supposed to go to the Levite, to the Levium. But Tziba ba midbar at a proportion seila. And those proportions, how much goes to who, was decided before we entered the land, when we were still in the midbar. Right? Mitoch sheyada, because he knew, because God knew. Asher mistaderes proportion zu yisharu yisrael b'chasam. Because God knew that if we follow these laws, right, when we get into the land, then everyone will have what they need. Now, this is very close to an idea that we had in Mor Nevuchim also. That in Mor Nevuchim understood that when we do the mitzvos of Hashem, right, the resulting society will be such a society where poverty is not as prevalent and hunger will not be as prevalent. If we leave the field fallow in the 7th year, we'll probably get a better yield the year after that, right? If we give money to the poor, then the poor people will not be hungry. They'll have food, right? If we give tithes to the Levium will then teach us Torah, we'll be wise, we'll be more educated, and they'll be supported, and the society will get better. If we don't charge each other too much money, if we don't charge each other, usury and stuff like that, we'll have a better functioning society, and then poverty will be less, oppression will be less, stealing will be less, etc., etc., etc. So, but Yehuda Levi is saying something very similar. So even though they may disagree on a lot of things, this point is really a point that kind of connects those two modes of thought. Yehuda Levi is saying God knows, and He knew when He gave us the Torah that if we followed these rules, things would be better for our society. Wealth would be better and more fairly distributed, right? And the Levites, the one who are in charge of our spiritual side of the nation, they would not be missing. They would not go hungry. Gam lo yagiu lekach shecholesh shevet o mishpacha beglal ma shekava od shakol yistalku b'shnat seyovam and akakosh sherachshu. Right. In other words, there wouldn't be one particular tribe or one particular family that would become impoverished, because every yovel, every 50 years, if they fell on hard times and had to sell their fields, at least there will be a reset. Every 50 years, those lands will come back to them. So overall, in this large scheme of things, certain families, tribes, one won't become impoverished and end up being dependent on the others, right? Everything will go back to the way it was originally divided in the beginning. It can go on and on. We can go through all kinds of details that we don't have time for right now about how the laws of the Torah would ensure that society would be prosperous. But here's the kicker, and this is where he differs from Maimonides, right? He says, but God's rules, right, are not like the rules that human beings would come up with, right? In other words, these are godly. Only God can tell us how to make these proportions. Wisdom, philosophy can't teach you these things. God can teach you these things. Chalila hashevach l'masdiram, Right. Hashevach l'masdiram. How praiseworthy is the one who set all these things up. Lo asachein l'chol goy. God did not do this for all other nations. Umishpatim bal yidam, right? And He didn't let them know these special laws that would have helped them prosper too. But only God gave these laws to the Jewish people. Seder zeh nishar b'shtei hamalchuyos, right? This seder, this order of how society was supposed to work and worked, lasted through the two kingdoms, meaning the first temple period and the second temple period, or at least parts of those periods, when people were doing the right things and living the way they were supposed to. For somewhere around 1,300 years. Some would tend to debate because if you read through Tanakh, it doesn't exactly corroborate that the people were keeping the rules during that time. They're more often not keeping the rules. But just for argument's sake, let's take what he's saying for at face value, that at least ideally during those times, the people, at least parts of those times, should have been living those, and to the extent that they did, they prospered, right? Lu halach ha'am b'derech yashar, but had we went on the right path, in other words, had we not eventually veered from the right path, haya nishar kimei hashamayim al haaretz, then it would have remained like that for all the days of heaven and the earth. It would have continued, and we wouldn't all be in exile suffering now. In other words, had we kept the rules, it would have lasted forever and ever and ever. So this is the idea that that the Chaver is teaching, and he's really continuing down this theme that the glory and honor of God comes from the people of Israel and living through the Torah, living the rules that the Torah gave us. Any comments? Questions? You all just it's fine. It's good. All right. So this is really, really beautiful and powerful stuff, and the idea though that this is only godly wisdom can provide us with this is a very Halevian idea, and it's an important linchpin for the thought process for this entire sefer, this entire book. So let's do paragraph 57, Nun Zayin. Omar Kuzari, says the Chazar King, Navochem atem hayom mishel hamatolos hagedolos ha'ele. Ezu umu mesugelos l'shmar al seder zeh. Right. This is I'm on 57, which is the 57, which is on page 223 in the corrupt conversion, and basically, you guys are now you no more longer have to keep these things. You're separated from these responsibilities now, right? How can any nation keep all these rules and laws, right? There's so many rules and laws. It's not surprising that you guys got separated from them and couldn't keep them, because who could possibly keep all this stuff? So Nunchas 58, Omer Chaver. So the Chaver answers, who can keep it? I'll tell you who can keep it. The community within which resides he, with a capital H, who is watching over that tzibur, that congregation, right? If you are a congregation within whom God resides, and God is watching and carefully observing what we're doing, right? Ma'anishoso, and punishes the nation when they veer off. V'gomelo miyad, and immediately also rewards us when we do the right thing. All right? Klomar hashchina, meaning the shchina, the presence of God which resides among us. That's the nation that can keep the rules, right? And did for a long time, right? Ha'ena Torah, don't you see, as Yoshua, the words of Joshua, who says, Lo tuchlu la'avod es Hashem, ki Elohim kidoshimu, right? El kanahu lo yisel peshachem elachatosechem. That God will not he will not carry your sins. He will punish you for your sins. So we lived a life where when we behaved, it worked, and we didn't behave, we got slapped, right? Zos al af shahat tzibur shalo Haya Nizar. He said that in a time, he criticized the people in a time when his congregation was really careful. If you think about it, Ad Kadei Shelo Haya Beinam, for example, when after the conquering of Jericho, right? Yeshua made a declaration that there's a cherem. You're not allowed to touch any of the things in Jericho. You can't take any of it, right? And everyone kept it, except for one Avarian, one person who just couldn't hold back. Zulas Achan, there was more than 600,000 people there, and only one guy couldn't hold himself back from taking some of the booty from thing. And they were punished in the way that we know. We know the next battle, there was, I think it was 36 people died in the next battle. And Yeshua was very upset by that because it was clearly a punishment. Someone had done something wrong. Why was God no longer with him? It was one guy. But that's a pretty good record, right? For hundreds of thousands of people not to violate this rule. It's despite the extremely tempting circumstances. You had a city full of wealth, whatever was in the city. It was free. The people were gone. They were killed. They were gone. You could go and take anything. It's like a free-for-all. It's like the walls of a supermarket just came down and you can just go grab anything. And no one did except for one guy, right? Miriam, and we see the punishment of Miriam with Tzoras when she had leprosy. Uzzah, the punishment of Uzzah, who died when he touched the ark. The sons of Aaron who died right away when they inappropriately did avodah on the base of Mikdash. When they looked at the Aron, there was a plague, people died. So the people knew, they felt the presence of God immediately upon anything going wrong, anything they did something, bam, they got slammed, right? And when they acted well, and if you look through, this is certainly one way to understand Tanakh, especially the books of Shoftim, Yoshua and Shoftim, right? Where, everything's good, God is good to people. People are bad, God punishes. Good, bad, good, bad. It's the whole thing. That's how almost every chapter reads. So that those people had the Shekhinah residing among them. So yeah, they were able to keep the rules. Right? And then, just give me 1 second. I need to take a little drink of water. I'm sorry. There was also these special miracles of the Shekhinah, the presence of God, that immediately came down in anger on even small sins. So they would see it in their walls and in their clothing. If a person did something wrong, they would have a nega. They would have a blemish on their skin or on their clothing or in their homes. Because when they did a really bad sin, then it would happen on their bodies. Immediately upon sinning, they got all of a sudden had a punishment. Right? It was automatic. Right? HaKohanim Muktashim L'Chochma Adin Azos, and the Kohanim, they especially had the special wisdom to understand L'Havchen Mami Zeloki, what the punishments are from God. Whether they had to lock the person up for a week or two, depending on the circumstances. Kamoshem Tinu Miriam, like the people waited for Miriam when she was afflicted with Saras. Umami Zemizgi, and what is natural and what is not a punishment from God. Etziv ability, etziv, whether it's stable or not. In other words, whether the nega, the plague is, the blemish is growing or shrinking. Zosi chochma mufla. This is a special wisdom. Yisala zeriz aleh, which God warned us about. Hishomer b'nega tzaras l'shmor meod. Be really careful about the sin of the plague of tzaras, velasos, and do everything as the Kohanim Halavim command you to do. So the Rabbi Yehuda Levi understands, right, that the time of that is depicted, the time after the people entered the land of Israel, the time before the building of the temple, but when they still had the tabernacle, but they were in Israel, and the time during the time of the temple, that the presence of God was so palpable, was so obvious, was so clear that that the people did keep the rules. This is problematic on a lot of levels, and some of the Mefarshim talk about this. It's problematic because the argument, because they didn't keep the rules according to most of Tanakh. Well, most of Tanakh, the people are misbehaving, right? And 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 you, and another argument that some people present here is that this is not, certainly not, the world that we live in today, and to say that the people keep the rules because God's presence is so evident is, on a certain level, almost critical, right? It's almost a criticism of the people. Like, yeah, sure, it's easy. Like, who wouldn't keep the rules if every time I said something wrong, I'd get slammed by lightning? Yeah, of course I'll keep the rules, right? But keeping the rules, and Maimonides would have said you keep the rules because it's the right thing to do, because you understand intellectually that this is right, and but here, Rabbi Levi is saying that it's because the closeness of God was so present, was so obvious, therefore the people kept it. So Omar HaKuzari, well, we're getting close to end time, so I'm almost time to open the floor for questions. So the Kuzari said, this is 59, Hayesh locha bazos dvarim mishachneim sheyikarvu zos. Right? Do you have some way of, this is of explaining this business with the negoim, with the tzaras, with the leprosy? I call it leprosy, even though it really doesn't have anything to do with what we call nowadays leprosy. But like, yeah, how does this work? And he's going to go on and in 60 to say it, but I'm kind of running up against the time limits here. So let me. I'm gonna stop and give like 5 minutes for discussion of everything we learned today. So what do you guys think we learned so far today?
Well, to me, it's sort of interesting that, you have two things happening at once, according to him. One is an individual sin that where God comes down on you and gives you a rash
Mm-hmm.
or something. And then there's a community sin where everybody suffers because of either one person doing something or the community itself doing something. And to me, it seems more, and again, it's more Maimonidean, I guess, to think that it's really what we're seeing is in reality is a community sin. That is, people do things in a non-religious way, a non-Torah way, and enough people do that and act in ways that
Mm-hmm.
are not according to what the Torah teaches. And because of that, communities suffer and society suffers, and then the individual suffers. So I like to look at it that way rather than one guy, picks up a trinket and everybody suffers because of that. It seems more to me that it's a community thing rather than an individual thing when it occurs for the society in general and for individuals in general, and not the fact that, you didn't put your tefillin on, so now you got a rash the next day.
And so, I want to, while you were talking, it occurred to me a way to kind of clarify, crystallize the difference between Maimonidean thinking and Halevi's thinking, because both posit that not keeping the Torah will result in something bad, and keeping the Torah will result in something good. But the Rambam understands it in a much more naturalistic way, right? That these laws make sense. So if we keep them, then it makes sense that society, that our lives will be better, right?
Yeah.
Halevi understands it as these laws are God given. So by doing them, by keeping them, God will treat us well, right? And by not keeping them, God will not treat us well. So only in Halevi's way of understanding the world does it work where a person can say, you know, if one of us has, does something wrong, or we think we may have done something wrong, and then something bad happens to us in our life, right? So many of us will think to ourselves, this was a result of this action that I did or didn't do, something that I did wrong, right?
Yeah.
And the Halevi would understand it as a punishment from God, right? I misbehaved. I should have helped that guy on the street I saw yesterday, and I just walked by and I ignored him. And now, I didn't get the raise that I was hoping to get, and now I'm getting hit in my own pocket, right? So, and you think to yourself, it was kind of like God's punishment, right? And Halevi would support that, right? He would say that's how it works, right? God is punishing you for not doing a mitzvah, right? And if you do a mitzvah, then you did get the reward, right? And then if you walk down the street and a guy needs help and you stop, you help him across the street, you give him some extra money to buy a sandwich, and then you go to work, right? And all of a sudden that day you get a raise, right? So that's a reward, right? Rambam obviously wouldn't look at it that way, right? But Rabbi Yehuda Levi definitely does look at it that way, and he says that therefore in those days this was much more blatant, much more clear. It still exists today. Rabbi Yehuda Levi said, that idea of that type of relationship with God still exists today, according to Levi. But then in those days, it was so much more obvious, right? It was so much more obvious because certain things used to happen, like Torah. You speak lashon hara, you say something bad about your friend. Next thing you know, you have this on your arm, right? And that's really the different way of thinking of these things, and they're both, fundamental ways of thinking about our relationship with God and how He intervenes in our lives. So anyway, Barry, I see you have your hand up.
So, what if a nation decided they wanted to follow the Noahide laws with all the benefits that might give them? How would they develop? I mean, would it be on them to try to develop the elaboration and all the details, setting up the system of justice and setting up rules of compensation if you injure someone? And I mean, I was
So
Or would the Lord step in and help them? They say they're going to follow the Noahide laws, or would they have to take the Maimonidean approach on their own?
So it depends, right? Yehuda Levi would say a very different answer to that question than Rambam, right? And Rambam would say that in theory, at least, right, if those people would honestly, earnestly, truly seek the truth and really, really do it right, that they could achieve the level that God wants from human beings, right? That it's doable. It's something that's doable. It's very difficult and challenging, and the Torah gives us a much easier, straightforward path because it's laid out for us, right? But whereas Rabbi Yehuda Levi would say, of course, it's a good thing, and God would probably reward them for it. He would, right? But and they should do that. But the special relationship that Jews have is only something that you can have that only one nation has. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Levi would answer. And we've seen that over and over again.
Yeah, you said that before because he said that even if you convert, you're not the same as if you were
Right.
born Jewish. It's a sort of the same thought. And what does he base that on? I mean, I still have a little vague understanding of what he bases that on.
Yeah, well, the some of it, like that a non-Jew can't access prophecy, is not is really his own thing. I don't know of people that preceded him that felt that way, but the general idea of understanding the many there's many verses in the Torah and Tanakh that talk about the specialness of the Jewish people, right? And depending on how you interpret those verses, right, one way of understanding them is Rabbi Yehuda Levi's way of understanding them, that the Jewish people have this special relationship, or an Am Segula, right? And have a special relationship with God that others don't. That's how Rabbi Yehuda Levi understands it.
Well, what he's saying is not only do they don't, but they can never. I mean, see,
Right.
That's
Right.
the thing
I
that,
mean, they may be able to achieve all kinds of things, but not the same thing, not the same level.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You know,
Yeah,
and that's just the
that
fact,
sort of
fact of
that
nature.
bothers me a little bit, but
Well,
I
you know,
understand. I understand it, but yeah. Anyway, that yeah.
I think it's important for us to learn and know this, right? I understand that there are many people that these ideas bother. I get it, but we still need to learn it and understand it, right? Because it's important and it has very influential. And I mean, it's what leads. It's one of those things that kind of makes me lean towards the Rambam. There's a book I have around by Menachem Kellner that compares these. Um, I'll have to remember. I'll put it out. Or somebody like maybe I'll put it in our texting group. It just slips my mind right now. And so, but where he contrasts these ideas, these two ideas. But anyway, yeah, this is it's gonna get more and more interesting and more controversial. But we're moving our way through it. Yeah,
So
Martin, go ahead. Yes,
just
please.
one thing that you haven't said about either of these two, or the two views.
Okay.
So if you do good, you're rewarded. If you do bad, you're punished. The whole concept of teshuva is so important, and it means that if you do bad, you can still
Yes.
you can change, and that leaves open the possibility. And that's what's to me is one of the things that's so amazing about
Yeah.
Judaism is even if you're bad, you can change.
Yes, you can
That's
come
not
around.
allowed in a lot of religions. That's
That
not
that
really.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But when and the idea that you do something bad and slam, you get hit by lightning, you know, but but hopefully God punishes you, gives you an out, like the nega, the tsaras. You're suffering from it, but if you learn your lesson, you'll get better, and then you'll be let out of your quarantine. Because it's supposed to remind you to change your ways. But it does somewhat sound a little bit like you're not given the opportunity to do tshuva. It does sound a little bit like that, but obviously Rabbi Levi understands and agrees with the concept of repentance. He's just not really discussing it at this juncture, But it's a good point to bring it up. Yeah, so I will stop here. Mir Hashem, next week we'll continue from paragraph 60. At the rate we're going, I think it'll be probably 3 more weeks until we finish the second essay, maybe even 4. But either way, it's all good. Anyway, thank you guys so very much for joining, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And
You too, Saul.
Thank
take
you.
care.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Saul.
Saul.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Saul.
You're welcome. Be well. Bye bye.